Today, I'd like to continue our discussion about the environment and the Laudate Si Action platform that Pope Francis is encouraging us to engage in so that we can study these issues about the environment, these very complicated issues, take a look at them and devise an action plan, something that we can get behind, we can support, something that we can look at and say, well, this might improve the quality of our air, the quality of our water, the quality of our soil, and this will help all living things. And so the Pope is calling us to reflect and see, well, what can we do to make our world a better place, a healthier place for all? One of the topics that frequently comes up with regard to this is drought and climate change. Is there any relationship between what we see in terms of increasing areas of drought in our world and times of drought and climate change? And when we look at climate change, some of the impacts that we've been studying and thinking about are the rising sea levels. And of course, this is measurable. This is not something that's a fantasy people make up and say, "Oh, the sea levels are rising." No, we study this scientifically and say, well, they're rising so much in this area of the world, and this is probably the cause as to why they are rising. We also see heavy precipitation, and of course, we're used to heavy precipitation in our world, but the extent to which it is happening and the intensity is something that is remarkable. And we also see storm surges that have caused flooding and coastal erosion. And we see this more frequently recently. And so it causes us to ask, well, is this related maybe to the global warming that is happening? Is there a causal link between these things that we're observing all around us and the warming of our planet? We also see really severe drought. And of course, drought has always been a phenomenon that's been with us, but the severe drought causes us to stop and say, well, is there some connection here with climate change? Uh, this severe drought has led to restrictions on non-essential outdoor water use. Uh, Fire departments are fighting now more brush fires, and crops are growing poorly. And of course, they would with this lack of water. Sometimes the irrigation systems just aren't sufficient to replace the water that has been missing, and sometimes we just can't. We don't have the water resources to irrigate our crops to that level that they would need in order to grow. So these are things that causes us to pause and say, well, what's happening here? Providence, for example, in Rhode Island, less than half an inch of rainfall in July, the third driest July on record. So again, that would cause us to say, well, what's happening here? Boston, 6/10 of an inch in July, fourth driest ever. Maine, 50 dry wells reported since 2021. So we see this pattern happening here. Why is this drought upon us? What's causing this? Uh, and climate change, one of the factors that the scientists who study this look at, say that warmer temperatures can lead to a greater evaporation and a greater drying of the soil. So we have to be aware that this could be a tremendous factor. If the temperature is increasing, what are going to be some of the effects of that increasing? And if we see increased drought, well, that's going to have a real impact in terms of the crops that we can grow, in terms of the quality of the soil. All of these things really are an effect that we have to be aware of and say, well, is there some way we can reverse this? Is there some way we can ameliorate the difficulties that this is going to create? Interesting thing about this too, and this is kind of remarkable, you wouldn't really think about it, is that it can really lead to some extreme rainfall events. because a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. And so when there is rain, it can come down very, very intensely in short bursts. So again, this can be a difficulty with flash flooding, obviously. And with that flooding, of course, damage to cars, to homes, to roads, the erosion that can happen. So again, this is an issue that we have to be aware of and say, well, is there something we can do to help with this? The research that's been done says that climate change is leading to what we call a stuck jet stream pattern. Huge meanders of the jet stream or the air current that get stuck in place. This locks in extreme weather events. So because the jet stream isn't moving, it's kind of locked. Well, all of that rain, naturally, it's going to be stuck in that one particular area, and it's going to be an issue. And so these extreme weather events are going to last for a longer period of time and be concentrated in certain areas and do a lot of damage in those areas because they're locked in by the jet stream. And so you can see the difficulty that that would cause. These can be associated also with extreme heat and drought in one location and then extreme rainfall in another. So there you have, separated by certain areas, you have this drought, and then in other areas, you have heavy rainfall. So when you look at it, you say, well, gee, this is not a good pattern. Is there something we can do to eliminate the drought, to make sure that the rainfall isn't as intense so we don't have the flooding? What can we do to help in this situation to make it better? So scientists study this and they look at it and say, well, if we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, it could help with lowering the temperature then. And if we lower the temperature, these extreme weather events, this intense drought, this heavy rainfall leading to flooding, this will not happen. So again, a possible path forward in terms of making the situation a lot better. So these things are studied, and the scientists take a look at them, do their research, get their facts, and say, well, these are some possible alternatives. We can help in this situation. And so as Pope Francis encourages us to study intently, to make use of the best scientific research and the best approach, really, to make sure that a lot of people really are helped. Because you can just imagine, if you're a farmer and you're dealing with drought, the difficulty that that's going to, cause for your business, for your livelihood, but also then the consequent effects of that, because that farmer is not going to be producing as much food, and so where are we going to get that food from? Where is it going to be replaced? You can see the difficulty there for people. And then same with the flooding, dealing with flooding of their homes, losing a lot of their property because of the intense rainstorms that come down in a certain area for just a long period of time because they're stuck in that jet stream. So if we can do things that will help us lower the temperature of our world and decrease these negative effects, certainly that is all to the good.